Hello and welcome to another episode of Something to Talk About Live. My name is Greg Rokiski. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm PFLAG National Social Media and Digital Content Manager. In honor and recognition of Veterans Day today, we have a great show for you. But to kick things off, I'm going to bring on our host for today and my colleague, PFLAG National's Director of Learning and Inclusion, Jean Marie Nevada. Hello, Jean Marie.
Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Not too bad. Good to be back with you again.
I know, I'm happy to see you. I was like, it's a change from my normal Liz conversation. I like the new background, everything. We're just changing it up a little this week.
Yeah, change is uncomfortable but good, right?
always uncomfortable but good.
Well, we have a good show, so I think I'm going to get out of your hair.
Thanks, Greg. I'll see you later.
Thanks.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. My pronouns are she and her, and ella if you speak Spanish. And I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. Every single week, we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality and inclusion. And this week, as Greg already said, we are talking about LGBTQ people who have done military service. So every single week, we pick an article in which we use to sort of kick off our conversation. And this week's article is online. If you go to straightforequality.org/discussion series. And this week's article actually comes from the Washington Post, an article by Casey Parks that came out a few weeks ago. And it was entitled "A Decade After Don't Ask, Don't Tell, LGBTQ Veterans Say They Still Feel the Effects." And let me just tell you a couple of the highlights, if you want to call it that, from the article. So it noted that since Congress first outlawed service by same-sex individuals, in around 1916, over 100,000 people have been pushed out of the military because of their sexual identities. And last month, a House subcommittee heard testimony about the lingering effects of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And one of the things that was really found were some of the incredible health challenges that many of these veterans face and how they still struggle to get coverage because of the way that some discharges happen. In fact, the article said that people are struggling to find work, to find health care. And it found that 15% of LGBTQ vets have attempted suicide, and that is compared to about 1% of other veterans. So there are many things to talk about in this conversation, and one of the ways that we can do this is by some of our brilliant guests. And for that, I want to introduce my friends and colleagues, Barbara Brass and Colonel Pat Thomson. Hello, ladies. How are you?
We're happy to be here. Yes. Thank you.
And happy Veterans Day, Colonel Pat.
Thank you.
Well, one of the reasons that we called you, besides the fact that I happen to love the two of you and think you're funny and amusing and we always have a good time, is the fact that you have recently been covered in a film called Surviving the Silence, which tells your really, really amazing story. And I will admit this, even though I have known you for many years, when I watched the film, there were so many pieces of your story that I didn't know about. So, Colonel Pat, could you tell us a little bit of how the film came to be?
How the film came to be. I want to take that question.
Oh, gosh. Okay, Barbara. All right.
You know how I am. She's the colonel, but I'm the general.
Oh, boy.
Well, we were giving our very first speech at a local community college for their Gay Pride Days, and that was November of 2013. So that is 8 years ago, almost to the day. And we were telling our story. In the audience was a filmmaker. We did know her because we had seen her film that she had just shown at this college 2 days before called Breaking Through. And she interviewed about 20 out LGBTQ politicians and judges across the country. And we met her the next day and did a talk with her. I mean, she had a get together. So we started telling her that we were going to speak the next night. And when I told her that we were going to talk about the Colonel Kammermeyer case, she just lit up. And she was there. She started filming. And basically after that talk, she said, I would like to do your story. And we said, oh, sure, fine. We had no idea what that meant. And that was the beginning, and that's how it evolved. Otherwise, we would probably have just gone on and done more talks locally and wherever we were asked to talk.
The next thing you're giving speeches and then you're movie stars, it appears. Sorry, Colonel Pat, go ahead.
Next thing we knew, the living room looked like a movie studio.
So, based on your own experiences, Pat, And when you read about what some of the veterans who were discharged, and so what some of the LGBTQ vets are talking about these days, are you surprised by some of the challenges that many veterans are still facing as a result of Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
I am. The ones that I know about, it's been a while since I was on active duty, but I hear stories, I read about stories, things that have happened to people. And yes, it's disturbing, especially with our trans friends. They're really having a harder time being in the military. It's not quite as bad now as it has been the last 4 years or so, but they're still having some problems. And I just feel like everybody that wants to serve our country should be able to do it.
Absolutely. If somebody wanted to understand more about what some of those lingering effects of Don't Ask, Don't Tell actually are, how would you explain that to people? I mean, because I think people think it's a policy that ended, but the effects of it have not necessarily ended. So what do you see when you talk to other veterans who have gone through those experiences?
Have we talked to anyone?
Well, we're kind of removed from the military now. Most Pat retired in 1994, so that's a lifetime ago. And most of the people, we go every year and have tried to go every year. Her military unit has a holiday party. Yeah. So we go and we see a handful of people there, and they're all retired. So very few people that we know are in right now. But from what I understand, basically, our culture has to change, and that's what PFLAG is all about, changing our culture. And we had 4 or 5 years of going backwards and adding hatred to the picture, bold, open hatred. So I think that we're really climbing up a hill again. I don't know how PFLAG National feels and how our chapter, well, with the pandemic, that's changed the picture totally too. A lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely made it a lot more challenging. So you actually, because you mentioned Colonel Kammermeyer, could you talk a little bit about, for people who don't yet know your story, and we certainly want everybody to see the film, this was actually one of the intersections of your story that I didn't know about prior to watching the film. So can you tell people a little bit about what your interaction was with her, that is part of this big story?
Yes, I was asked to set the board, which would hear her case. And there were, I think, 6 colonels on that board, and I was the only female. And I was the one that had, since I was in charge of the board, afterwards, I had to stand up and look her in the eye and tell her that we were taking her rank. And she was no longer in the military. That was a very hard thing to do.
Well, also she, I don't know if it was clear too, but she came out as a lesbian when she was going for a higher security clearance. She was asked, and she told the truth. Yeah. And this was the result, and she continued with it the whole way through.
Yeah, she felt like that if she told that she should tell the truth and that the military would support her. And she was very disappointed that she did not get that support. And
so
yeah,
it must have been an incredibly conflicted period for you and a frustrating period for you. What was it like for you to be in that position, to be, first of all, the only woman assigned, and knowing who you were, to also be navigating this while seeing what was happening to her? What did that feel like?
It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. She did not know that I was a lesbian at the time. She did not know that until later.
Until I came out to her.
Yeah.
Because you know how I am. Can't keep
shy.
My mouth shut. Shy. He's very, very shy, but so can't keep my mouth shut, and always looking to expose the truth and share the truth and be the truth. And it took a while for me to realize that I couldn't do that all the time. So Pat had to suffer through with what she did, the hard task she did, and all I could do was try to say, "You're doing the best thing for for the situation and
Yeah.
hoped for the best. And
Well,
it was.
It was great to have Barb's support when I got home, because I was devastated that I'd had to do that to Colonel Kammermeyer.
Yeah. And since then, and this does come out in the film, you since have a relationship with her and a connection to her, and a lot has changed. Does it, looking back on the entire experience, are you able to sort of see how that was a step towards what needed to happen in the end, even though it was really difficult, or does it remain kind of a very frustrating point?
Yes, yes. Well, she appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court, and the judge there allowed her to return back to her unit, and she served 3 more years. And then she received a lot of honors when she retired.
Yep, she did.
Yeah.
She definitely did. And Barb, what was it like for you? So you mentioned that it was very hard for you to hold your tongue. You are somebody who definitely sees yourself as an activist. Anyone who knows you knows that you're definitely not a shy human being. What was it like to know that sometimes you did have to be quiet and that you did have to be silent, basically to protect Pat in some cases?
Well, in the early years, it was just a given to me that I knew I had to. And of course, when we got together in '84, people were not out like they are now or have been in the last number of years. So I knew that our life was the way it needed to be. I had to. And when you see the film, people who see the film, you'll see that I even incorporated, when I remodeled our house, a secret passage so that somebody coming to visit, staying in our home, would not know that we did share a bedroom, because we could change rooms in the dark of night in the secret passage. So I knew I was always very cognizant of the fact that I had to be careful, but I never did. I never did anything to cause a problem for Pat, or I don't think she ever felt that I did anything out of bounds.
No.
Yeah.
But what she did during that whole trial was the most amazing thing. And she didn't understand it. And I didn't either at the time, didn't understand it. But what she offered that trial was the best that could have been to make for the best outcome that could have happened. And that is what I just think is phenomenal.
I can't say it enough. If you have not seen Surviving the Silence, you really, really should watch it. We'll make sure that, I know that Greg is running the URL at the bottom of the screen. It is a fascinating story. And I distinctly remember when it got to the part about constructing that passage so you could change rooms, and just sitting there and thinking, this is a version of reality that seems unimaginable to some people. And yet it was your every single day reality. Pat, one of the things that often comes up when I'm talking to people about military service and LGBTQ people is I hear people say to me, well, why would you want to serve when your country doesn't care about you anyway? And I still hear this sometimes, because we know we are not past some of those challenges. As somebody who dedicated quite literally her entire life to military service, how do you respond to that as a person who happens to be gay and chose to serve and served for a very long time?
Well, I was about, thank you for the question. I was about 10 years old when my brother, who was a Navy pilot, was killed in a plane crash, and during World War II. And I wanted to serve to honor him, to honor his service. And that was the main reason that I have stuck to it, for him, as well as for me and for my country that I love.
So it was very much a personal commitment for you in many, many ways. Yes. So there are still so many needs of LGBTQ veterans out there. We know that people need support. We know that people do not have, in many cases, the adequate resources that they need. Are there organizations, and obviously we know you love talking about PFLAG, and I love that too, but are there any organizations that you have seen that have been doing really good work in this space, or that you would point people to look at to understand this issue a little bit more?
Well, there's SAGE.
Well, that's not military related. That's for elder LGBT.
But it's supportive.
Right. If you're referring to military, there's, I think, the Modern Military Association of America.
Yep.
And we also have a personal friend who here in our area who is a trans woman who works for the VA, and it's not the VA directly, but she works with the VA, and she was telling us that they are doing some things, but not enough. They're the directors of the program locally, and I don't know how that works nationally, but locally, she was upset that the directors are kind of not being supported on upper levels. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but she herself, since she knows what needs to happen for trans people, she can do the best she can to get local services here. So that's what we do know. And of course, PFLAG supports everybody everywhere about everything. And that's what I always tell people about PFLAG, that it is like the best organization in the whole wide world. And I'm not saying that because you're paying me, but I'm saying I just feel so strongly about that. And so that is so important. And as a matter of fact, whenever we go out anywhere, almost, I wear usually this Celebrate Diversity pin and some kind of rainbow. And if there's a chance to connect with somebody, and that brings a connection, often it just, someone will say, I like your pin, or I like your earrings, or I like your rainbow. And you know that they're trying to make a connection with you. And then I can bring up PFLAG, and of course I can let them know about our film and all whatever else, however the conversation goes.
Colonel Pat, when you talk to other vets, and I don't just mean when you're talking to LGBT ones, I actually specifically mean those who aren't, has your experience been that people really understood what was going on for LGBTQ service members at the time? And at the time, did you know of many other service members who thought the ban was bad and thought that things needed to change? Or did it seem like most people are sort of swimming in the same direction?
During that time, I wasn't close to a lot of military people. But when I was part of an active unit, it wasn't anything that came up. It wasn't a problem at that time.
Right.
So not recently. I haven't talked to anyone recently that I could talk to you about, to tell you about.
Yeah, but even back at the time, people just didn't discuss it. It quite literally was a don't ask, don't tell. We're not going to have any conversations about this for most people. So
nothing came up
Yeah.
when you were
No,
in any situations where it would even be
no.
a question of should we not ask or not tell. It just was nothing. It's nothing. It wasn't, just didn't exist almost at
Yeah,
the
it
time
didn't.
in Pat's world.
Yeah.
I know.
which is kind of,
Tired.
it's sort of fascinating to think about when you realize what a significant and detrimental and destructive policy this was. And yet it was not something that really was discussed very often. It was not that much of a salient issue. And yet it was an issue that caused absolute destruction in so many people's lives. It's kind of fascinating to hear that disconnect. So one of the advantages that you both have now, because you have so much time between when everything happened and looking back on it today, and certainly during the making of the film, were there any things that as you look back at them still make you angry? Or are there still things that feel difficult or unresolved to you? Or are you feeling basically good about the entire story? Or do you still look back and think, I can't believe some of that happened? Because I have to admit, some of the story was so unbelievable to me that this really occurred. Do you ever get that feeling?
Well, I'm happy that the film was made, and, specifically for historical purposes, for those who come after us. But I can't remember that I got angry or upset about it. But I was, sometimes you don't see that until later when you're a part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I had enough anger for both of us.
I think so.
and I think that's what motivated me later in the last few years, because of what was happening in our country. that I needed to do something, was fighting the war that I had to fight. And that was starting 5 or 6 years ago. So when the film had started, that hadn't happened. It was 2014. You know, life was beautiful at the time in a way, in a certain way.
Right.
And then when we had 2016 election and 2017 started, then life changed totally. And I felt that I was fighting the war that I couldn't fight because I wasn't in the military, or I couldn't fight for my parents and family who were in the Holocaust and all of those things. So yeah, the anger motivated me. And to bring it around to another big truth right now is that this year I was crushed by severe depression. Mm-hmm. Totally crushed. And I did not expect that. I was doing fine. And when the pandemic started, I was actually quite happy because all the outside activities that we were consumed with politically came to a screeching halt. And I could work on projects that I wanted to do at home and things that had been left behind. So but when the new year came, this beginning of this year, and I don't know if it had a lot to do with everything, I can't pinpoint it, but it just hit me upside the head with this incredible depression that I've never felt before. And I've been working super hard from the beginning of this year with every kind of modality to get better. And when Pat tells me that she thinks I'm better and I feel better, then I know I'm better, but it's been rough, very rough.
It has been, and I'm sorry to hear that as somebody who has experienced incredibly bad depression. I know what it's like when it feels like suddenly your brain has taken over your body and you can't even function anymore. And it is so hard to describe to people who have never experienced it. I'm sorry to hear about that. So one of the things that I think has always made me incredibly charmed by both of you is the fact that you have had this lifetime of activism. So after the military, and especially in the past few years, you've had a lot of political activity. Could you tell people a little bit about what you've done? I do remember your protests that went on with the cat ears. As I was reminding people, I have my own pair from them. This is the actual Barb and Pat set that I own. So could you tell people about what your activism has looked like lately? We know you're really involved in PFLAG, but what other issues have attracted you and taken up your attention?
Well, recently we've been fighting for our governor not to be recalled, because there was a group that were pushing to get him recalled. And so we helped make banners. We stood on corners and held the banners and waved at people and signed petitions, and and we won.
I like the confidence with which you approach that.
Yeah.
Well, what motivated me, as I said, the anger after the election of 2016, I started a resistance group, and the beginning of that was instigated by, I think it was Courage Campaign, and they said, do not watch the inauguration, do not have anything to do with it, get out on the street. And they called it Anti-Trump Tuesdays or something like that. And I could not even use that word. So I said, we're going to call it Resistance Action Tuesdays, RAT. And we started with 7 people. The next week I put it out online somewhere, and we had 20, and then 40, and then 60, and then 80, and then 100, and then more and more and more and more. And those were people in this really red Placer County area and region of our state who they were like-minded and like-hearted, and it felt so good because we had built a community. So we were out there every Tuesday for an hour with everybody, made signs, and we did all kinds of different actions. I made a life-size casket at one time after the shooting in Florida of the students. And we did tombstones in memory of them and did an action. We did die-ins. We did, all kinds of things. We supported Social Security and Medicare and whatever came along. So we were out there. And then at one point, fairly early on, somebody said, I can't make it on Tuesdays. Can we do Thursdays? I said, sure, why not? So it became RATT, the Rat Pack, and that's what we left it as, the Rat Pack. So it's Resistance Action Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I have a hold of that email list, that contact list. And so what I've done since the pandemic, since we stopped meeting out on the street, is let people know of whatever else is going on in the region, and promoting candidates, and even, well, of course, our film and PFLAG events, whatever comes along that I feel is important for people to know here, and even things that aren't politically related as well. So it's been a good thing to continue on with that, and it has helped me as well to kind of keep my finger on that button.
And I think the sense of building community matters. Sorry, Pat.
And when we were out on the street, I just wanted to say that we would be peacefully holding our signs, trying to educate the people in cars going by. And all of a sudden we would see the white supremacists come marching across the street, and they would try to run us off the sidewalk. They had Black American flags that they would wave across our heads and get up in our faces and yell at us. And so we would just pretend they were not there. It was not easy, but we felt like that was the best way to handle them.
And that was captured in the film.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the filming, and people say, oh, it seems like it took a long time, but actually it really was perfect timing, because if that film had ended prior to this last round of activism and what they did capture with what Pat just told you, that it would have been just, oh, here two, nice older ladies that are, survived the silence of the military, and now they can live their happy little lives and everything's just fine. And everything is not just fine on many levels. And one still being don't ask, don't tell, and trans in the military, and all of those issues. I wanted to say one thing, that one of the side effects of age and COVID and depression is bad memory. And I admit I never had a good one, but I pulled out some notes. We were on a call with Cindy Abel, the filmmaker, and she and whoever it was she was talking to, and I can't even remember. Anyway, they came up with this. It was OUT, the acronym for OUT. Out yourself as an ally. U is understand your impact, and T is tell the truth. And I think it's a hashtag. I don't do Twitter, so I'm not really familiar with hashtags. I think she puts it out there once in a while, but I think it's brilliant, because truly, to out what any of us in any marginalized group need are allies. Yeah. And with PFLAG, that is the critical aspect, and you are one of those who makes that happen.
I try. I try. So tell me, and I really love that. I think it's a reminder and a call to action for all of us, isn't it? Yeah. Out yourself, understand your impact, and tell the truth. I love that. Look, Marianne already said she's going to remember out. So I just we have time for probably one more question. What has people's reaction to the film been? I mean, as I said, I've known you, and there were so many things in the film that I didn't know. So what are you hearing from people when they see the film?
Well, I would just want to say this, that before the film, when we did our first speech at American River College, it wasn't American River, it was
Sierra College.
Sierra College.
We have 1 minute. You better stop.
Yeah, okay. There were young women met us as we were coming down off the stage with tears running down their face. And I was really impressed by that. I just wanted to say that.
And that is what a lot of people say when they see the film. They are tearful. They just feel such compassion. And aside from some of the details that people didn't know about us personally, even just strangers who see it say that sort of thing, but people who know us say the same thing, that they feel very much compassion and sad for what we had to go through. And at first I took that as, well, we've got it good. we really have got it good, and I appreciate that people feel that way. But I do say, as Pat says, this is for historical purposes. People need to know what we who had it good went through, and that was not good. So just think of those who were thrown out and were tortured and were treated mistreated along the way. So I think it's been a wonderfully positive reaction all over everywhere.
Well, thank you. I have to say, it left me with a lot of compassion. It left me with even more gratitude for both of you. And anybody who underestimates the two ladies with their signs on the corner are absolutely out of their minds, because you two have absolutely changed the game. And you literally did change history, Colonel Pat. And I am so grateful for you. And I'm grateful, Barbara, for everything that you have done and the other side of the story that you told. Thank you both for being here. Please, 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 everybody go see Surviving the Silence. Hopefully we will see you back here and we can talk a little bit about what you've learned along the way. Thank you both.
Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your Veterans Day.
Thank you. You too. Well, that gets us to the end of yet another show. We'll be back again next week. Again, my name is Jean Marie Navetta. I am at PFLAG. So if you need help between now and our next show, please visit pflag.org/find to find your local chapter. As we wrap up every single week, we remind you to run fast, to laugh hard, and most of all, to be kind. And please, 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 if you haven't done it yet, please get vaccinated and do the right thing. We'll see you next week on Something to Talk About Live. Bye, everybody.